Good morning, everyone. It is certainly an honor and a privilege to be here with you this morning. If you consider yourself a visitor, we like to extend an extra special welcome to you. And we thank each and every one of you for getting out your kayaks and making it all the way here this morning. It's whoever's been praying for rain, you can quit now. We've had enough. This morning, we're going to be continuing the study that I've been doing in Ecclesiastes. So our title this morning is The Vanity of Toil. This is a study I've set out upon because, honestly, I've been confused about the book of Ecclesiastes for a very long time. I've read the book so many times, and I find myself always stuck in this place of what they call cognitive dissonance, where it's like he'll say one thing, he'll say another, and you're kind of confused as to what the point is. And for most of my life, I've been in that cognitive dissonance and thought, one day I'm going to get this all sorted out and figure out what's going here. And so since I've embarked upon that mission, I get to share that with each of you or inflict that upon each of you, however you like to view it. Thank you for the reading we had this morning. That's our text of the morning, so we're not going to read through the whole thing, but we will step through it here in a few minutes. As we get started, this is our second installment of this series on Ecclesiastes, so we will take a moment to review what we talked about last time. We talked about the basic structure of the book of Ecclesiastes. This is a book of wisdom. It's written very much in the style of like the ancient Greek philosophers who would almost like go into a town, and it's like a speech that they would give in the street, and people would come listen to it. And they would expound upon their observations and their wisdom, and people would come and ask questions and learn about it. This book is kind of written in that style. To break down the specific structure of the book of Ecclesiastes, we have a narrator speaking at the beginning of the book. We have that same narrator coming in and speaking at the end of the book. That narrator comes in and tells us about the wisdom that this preacher is going to give us. And he tells us that the preacher, his concluding point, the preacher's point is everything is vanity. Vanity of vanity. Vanity of vanities. Everything is meaningless. Nothing is worthwhile. So then once we get into the actual meat of what this preacher, who is believed to be Solomon, is speaking, chapters 1 through 9, what he's doing is he's adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things. He's going through logical progressions, making arguments, bringing up his observations to try to find the meaning of life. What's the meaning behind everything? And his conclusion is vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity. He will go on in chapters 10 and 12. He's compiled a collection of proverbs that tries to find the answers to the previous questions, but he never quite does. And so the narrator comes back at the very end and says, the end of the matter has been heard. The real meaning behind everything is to fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. And so what we have is the book of Ecclesiastes actually being a cautionary tale about or against being like this preacher. One of the cognitive dissonances I've always had is it uses this term preacher, and I've always thought, well, a preacher's a good thing, right? He's somebody we should listen to. But I believe the point of this book is that the preacher himself is missing the point, is missing the meaning. And I think in our study this morning that will become even more clear than maybe it did last time. The narrator's viewpoint is he has a negative viewpoint on the preacher, the one giving this wisdom. I believe he thinks that wisdom giver is missing the point. There are a few key terms that come up over and over. This wise person, his wisdom is coming from his observations in life, his own experiences. And he talks about everything being vanity. That means everything being striving or grasping after wind. These are terms you'll see throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. That means everything's pointless. These things change nothing in the long run. Everything is pointless. It makes no difference. No lasting change is made. Another phrase you'll see repeated throughout the book of Ecclesiastes is things being under the sun or under heaven. This is looking only to observations in the world. This is wisdom apart from God. This preacher, his wisdom is based on his observations in this fallen world and does not take wisdom from God into account. And we'll see that throughout this study. This book contains many contradictions. One of the things we'll study today is actually one of these contradictions, where on the one hand, toil, work, is pointless. It's vanity of vanities. But then on the other hand, there are blessings and good things that come from work. And so it's a contradiction in the way that he teaches these things. So what we will endeavor to do this morning is to tease apart that contradiction. And we will find that true meaning can only be found in fearing God and keeping his commandments. The last time I spoke on this, we talked about the vanity of wisdom. The preacher in Ecclesiastes 2:15 says, "Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity." So last time we talked about the preacher's conclusion that wisdom itself is a waste of time. Because death, in the end, the wise will die just like the fool, and they will be in the same place, according to him. And we teased more of that out last time. And so some of the things the preacher missed is that God himself is the source of wisdom. And wisdom is clearly manifest. Death is not the end. So the fool and the wise don't end up together at the end. Death is not the end there. And wisdom will not be outweighed by folly. Those were our main takeaways from our last study. So let's get into our talk this morning, the vanity of toil. When I was a teenager, one of my best friends, he loved playing this game called The Sims, and he would spend hours playing this game. And this is a game that it's essentially playing house. And every time I would go to his house, he'd show me all the cool things. So you make your character, and you make them a house, and they live, and they go to work, and you're simulating like family life in this game. And I'd go to his house, and he would every time show me all the things in his fake house that he was so proud of. He had a radio that he could actually upload MP3 files into. He was so proud of that. And he loved this game. And lots of people love this game, The Sims. If you play that game and love it, more power to you. I have tried to play this game, and I can't do it. Because when I play a video game, well, I get up early in the morning, I go to work. After work, it's time for chores. It's time for taming the chaos around the house or the property. And then it's time for bed, and then it's time to get up early and go to work. And in this game, what you have to do to get your radio or whatever is get your character up early, get your character to work, clean the house, fix the things around. I just couldn't do it. Like, this work. The game is work. And I'm playing a game to escape from work. I don't know. If you like the game, more power to you. Work isn't fun. I think we all can observe that. There are times where work is enjoyable. But this life is full of work. It's not fun. That's why I appreciate the observations that the preacher makes, because I feel like I can identify with his feeling about this, the vanity of vanities. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at his arguments this morning. We will bring up the wisdom of Proverbs, which I believe the preacher is responding to some of the wisdom of Proverbs. We're going to examine what his arguments are. And then we're going to compare that wisdom to the wise sage Jesus and to see what he has to say on the matter. And I think we'll see this morning in some surprising ways. There are some ways that Jesus agrees and some ways that Jesus disagrees. And eventually we will see what the preacher missed so that we can have that wisdom for our own lives. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 24 teaches us about work, hard work. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. So Proverbs recognizes one way or another you're going to work hard, right? Either you will willingly work hard and be diligent and then you will rule, or if you're slothful and you try to be lazy, you will be forced to work hard. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 29, do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. So somebody who works hard and is diligent and builds this skill, they're going to be able to make a lasting change in this world, right? They're going to stand before kings. They'll get to go places. They'll become an important person. They won't stand before obscure men. Proverbs 13:22, and I think this proverb specifically is one that our preacher this morning is responding to. Proverbs 13, verse 22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So this good man, this hard worker, this skillful worker is going to leave this inheritance not just to his children, but that inheritance will last to his grandchildren as well. He will leave this legacy from his hard work to his grandchildren. On the other hand, the sinner, the slothful person, his wealth is going to be given to the righteous. And our preacher this morning, our wise person, Solomon, reads these verses and says, that kind of makes life sound like a vending machine, right? You put in your hard work and you get out your ruling. You get out your lasting change. You put in your diligence and you get out your inheritance. And so he's going to respond to these things. We'll get into what he says about them specifically. Verses 18 through 19. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I'm going to work hard my whole life, and I'm going to be like the righteous person that Proverbs promised, right? And I'm going to leave this inheritance. What do I do when my kids are knuckleheads and they squander that inheritance? Or maybe their kids squander that inheritance. It's kind of a waste of time to work to build up that inheritance, right? What would be the point if they're just going to squander it anyways? And maybe they won't, but it's certainly possible. And so I'm going to work so hard, and at the end of the day, death will still come for me. And after that, someone else is going to be master of everything that I worked for. Someone else is going to take all of that, and it will then be theirs. So you can see why he concludes this also as vanity. So we see from this, we understand his thinking that death is still an inevitability. As he looks down the stream of time through his observations, at the end, there is always that grave marker standing there. Death is always at the end of his thinking, whether it be about wisdom, whether it be about hard work, no matter what it is throughout the rest of a book of Ecclesiastes, that death is weighing heavy on his mind, and it is the end of things for him. It's an inevitability. And it is that death that makes everything vanity. Someone else is going to inherit all of the benefits of his hard work. That just doesn't seem right, because the future is uncertain. I can identify with that feeling, right? He'll go on to say in verses 20 and 21, he kind of kicks it up a notch here. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. So he's fallen into despair. He's lost heart in his daily work, whatever that looks like. He's lost his motivation, and despair has taken over because he knows no matter what, at the end of the day, all of his wealth, all the benefits that he has worked so hard for it is going to go to somebody who did nothing for it. They did no work for it. It's going to go to children or grandchildren that don't appreciate it, that are willing to squander it. Maybe in our world, it'll go to estate taxes, wind up in the hands of the government. And if you want to feel like your inheritance is a vanity, just wait till the politicians get a hold of it. I think we can understand how unfair this feels for someone else who did nothing to wind up with the things that we worked so very hard for. And so I identify with the preacher here. I certainly feel what he's saying when he talks about this being a vanity and a great evil. He's observing that this is the opposite of Proverbs 13:22, where it says the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. And he's looking around and he's examining his own inheritance he's going to leave, and he's like, well, at some point, it's actually going to be the other way around, right? Proverbs will get it wrong, he thinks. That sinner's wealth will not be laid up for the righteous. My wealth will be laid up for the sinner. Someone who doesn't deserve it is going to wind up with my stuff. And it's not right. It's an injustice. And if you're like me, you can certainly feel that from what he's talking about. No wonder he falls into despair. What's the point in working hard if someone else is just going to get everything I worked hard for? What's the point in working so hard if I can't make a difference in this world, if I can't make any lasting change? So he ends this part of his statement, verses 22 and 23. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. So the preacher comes to the conclusion, the only profit you get out of hard, diligent work is sorrow, despair, vexation. That's all the real profit that you'll get from this. And unrest. So no wonder he concludes that it's a waste of time. It's vanity. It's grasping for the wind. Now this is one of those cognitive dissonance moments, right? The preacher's going to take a minute. He's going to say, okay, so I get how depressing and despairing that is, but I recognize some things that are true. So let's go over what he says here in verses 24 through 26. And this is a very pleasant sounding passage. And that's always kind of led me astray a little bit, but hopefully we can tease this apart a little bit. He says, and you can almost feel the on the other hand, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after wind. So I look at this and I say, yeah, there's a lot of truth there. There is nothing better for a person to enjoy the fruit of your own labor, right? I've been growing a garden, and maybe I've talked too much about my garden, I don't know, but it occupies so much time, and I think about things while working in the garden. I'll tell you what, there is no better tasting tomato than the one that came from my own tomato plant. It just is amazing because, yeah, it actually does taste better from the ones from the store, but also it's like, I worked. I did this. And so there's like a sense of pride as I eat that tomato. It tastes amazing because it tastes like my own labor and the fruit of my own labor. We have chickens, and I tell you what, the eggs that come from those chickens, they're chicken eggs. But they're amazing because I fed the chickens. I watered the chickens. I did all the work. And so these eggs are amazing. It's like, look what I have produced. Look at what came from my hands, from my work. And the preacher here is acknowledging, and I think he's right, that this is a blessing from God to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. In the old law, God commanded them to have a Sabbath day, a day of rest, a day that they would enjoy the fruits of their labor. This is a blessing from God. He even recognizes that there is no enjoyment of anything apart from God. But what gives me pause is the statement at the very end, because what an amazing blessing from God, but he concludes it with, this also is vanity and striving after wind. Who in their right mind would think a blessing from God would be a waste of time? That's what's always given me pause about this, because it sounds so pleasant, such a great thing, but he says at the end of the day, even this is vanity. Even this is a waste. To help us understand his tone here, I want to go over a few details over the book of Ecclesiastes. This is one of 7 what we call calls to enjoyment. There's 7 times in this book where he says, there's nothing better than to enjoy the fruits of your labor, enjoy the wife of your youth, enjoy the things you have. And that's in Ecclesiastes 2, what we've read here in verses 24 and 26. There's another one of these calls to enjoyment in chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. The next one is in chapter 5, verses 18 through 20, and we'll look at that one here in a moment because it illuminates his thinking a little more clearly. Chapter 7, verse 14 has a call to enjoyment. Chapter 8, verse 15. Chapter 9, verse 7 through 10. We don't have that one in our study this morning, but read that, Ecclesiastes 9, 7 through 10. You'll very quickly understand that his calls to enjoyment are not quite so pleasant as they sound. And chapter 11, verse 7. These are 7 calls to enjoyment that occur throughout this book. All of these acknowledge that enjoyment, enjoying the fruits of your labor, enjoying your situation, is a blessing from God. It's a good thing. In this call to enjoyment we read this morning, he acknowledges this proverb about the sinner's wealth going to the righteous. But once again, he concludes at the end that this is vanity, striving after wind. And so I believe that this call to enjoyment is a disguised resignation. It's almost as if to say, you're going to work hard your whole life, and all you're going to earn from that is vexation, sorrow, stress, unrest. So you know what? At the end of that, you're going to die, and it's all going to go to somebody else anyways. You might as well just live it up while you have it, because at the end, there's not going to be any of it for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, this parallels our passage from Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And notice how he ends it. Beginning in verse 13, there is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is the father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, and much vexation and sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. This enjoyment, to him, this is, Karl Marx said that religion is the opium of the masses. It's just there to make us feel better, distract us from all of the difficult things in life. And so I believe these calls to enjoyment are kind of the same concept. You might as well just enjoy everything you've got now, because it's all going to waste. The things you work for in your life, the things you try to pass on to your children, they're going to be squandered. You might as well enjoy everything for yourself now, and it will hopefully distract you from all the unrest and all the angst and all the difficulties that work brings you. It's pretty easy to see how some of this type of thinking translates into things in our modern world. I think when we look around us, we see a lot of people thinking about work in the same way. And I think it leads to one of two things. On one hand, it leads to despair, or it leads to people going fully the other direction with the call to enjoyment, right? We're going to just live it up while we have it. I think this leads a lot of people to despair. There's a lot of people that are just very upset that they have to work. And day in and day out is a drudgery, and they give themselves over to it. They know they have to work to eat and to pay the bills, but man, they are just counting down the days till they can retire or not have to work anymore. They'll do anything they can, dreaming of the day when they don't have to work, because they are overtaken with despair. Probably in our life, we've seen people who have been overtaken with despair for their daily work and have given up, just given up on their job. Have you ever seen these instances where you think to yourself, you had one job to do, and you messed up that one job? There's quite a few examples of these. Whoever painted the street here for the SOT sign, I'm sure they were just overcome with despair. They had one job, and they messed it up. Whoever was supposed to design the new restaurant menus, you had one job. Anybody want some watermelon on the cob? You had one job. And I guess this English tutor has entirely given up. Either that or it's a different kind of tutor. I don't know that we need that. You had one job. You've given up to despair. You just don't care anymore. You're just phoning it in, just getting to Friday, whatever you can just to pass the time. These are silly examples of despair, but I think if we look around in the world around us, there are real examples of despair. There's places in this world where people are starting to talk about things like assisted suicide because there's no point in living. People are overcome with despair left and right. And if the preacher in Ecclesiastes is right, you don't blame him. This life is hard. We have to work so hard just to survive. And at the end of it, there's just a grave waiting for us. There's nothing more to it. Of course it's vanity. It's no surprise that people are overcome with despair. However, there's a lot of people that go to the opposite end of the spectrum. They respond to this despair with what's called hedonism. Now, I've always understood hedonism to be just a general word for people just doing immoral stuff, right? Just acting, just wilding out there. There's a technical definition to hedonism, and this is actually a philosophy of life. And I think people take it and run with it. Hedonism is defined as the prioritization of pleasure in one's lifestyle, actions, or thoughts. So I'm going to take pleasure, that which pleases me, and place that in the highest place. Put myself in the highest place, and the priorities in my life are giving myself as much pleasure and as much fun as possible. There are several ideas of hedonism that fall under this umbrella. There is psychological hedonism, and this is a psychological practice of describing all human behavior as pleasure-seeking or pain avoidance. So someone who subscribes to this type of thinking thinks that everything you do is somehow you believe it's going to bring you pleasure in the end. It's going to please you somehow. Even if you go through the hard things of work now, it's because you expect a greater pleasure from that in the future, a greater reward in the future. And so in this type of thinking, there's no such thing as general or true care for mankind. You're helping somebody out charitably because you think that it's going to bring you some greater reward that's going to make you happy later on. There's what's called ethical hedonism. This is the idea that ethical behavior is determined by what will increase pleasure and decrease pain the most. So the only way that you can help people out, truly, is to do whatever maximizes the pleasure in their life. It's a good thing to do if it increases pleasure for the most people and decreases pain the most. Now, there might be a little bit of merit to that, but I think if you're totally bought into this, there's a lot of bad things that can come from it. There is also axiological hedonism, and I think we see this one in spades in our world right now, that the idea that only pleasure has intrinsic value. This is the idea that if something feels good or tastes good or is good to me, seems good to me, that is because there is something about me that intrinsically needs that thing. Cheeseburgers taste so good to me. That's probably because my body is finely tuned to need cheeseburgers. It's obvious that it's not from the way that I look. But that's an example of how this type of thinking works, that only pleasure itself has intrinsic value. And these types of thinking, all of these, applied in our world can lead to a lot of things. Resistance to work. Every now and then I'll see it making the rounds in the news or on social media or whatever. There'll be a TikTok or Instagram reel video of usually it's a young person, and they're sitting in their car crying after their 5-hour shift at the grocery store, and they are very upset that now they have to spend the next 40 years of their life working. And it's not fair because I didn't even ask to be brought into this world, and it's a world full of pain and work, and it's not fair that I have to do it. And so they resist that work as much as possible because that work is taking away from my pleasure. It's getting in the way of all the fun and all the experiences that I want to have. This idea also leads to an extreme libertarianism. We should always be free to pursue the most fun and the most pleasure as possible. And because pleasure is the only thing that has any intrinsic value, anybody that gets in the way of what makes me feel good is doing something morally wrong. And so we see in our society right now a huge overturning of moral expectations. There are people doing what they think are charitable works for other people that have no moral expectations with them. There were a few years ago, I don't know if they do this quite so much anymore, and it's in a few other states, where the idea was to help those who are addicted to drugs. The way that we can help them the most is to give them the clean needles, and we'll set up tents where they can go to, and we'll give them the drugs that we know are safe, that we know aren't tainted with other poisonous things, with the clean needles. And with this help given, we're maximizing pleasure for these people, right? They get their pleasure from that drug, but there's no moral expectation with it. We view that pleasurable thing that they're doing as the highest moral for them. This is a kind of thing that hedonism can lead to. YOLO, have you ever heard that phrase? It stands for you'll only live once. And our society is full of people right now that this is their guiding philosophy. You'll only live once. And, somebody will have some intrusive thought about some wild thing they want to do, and they'll yell YOLO, and then they'll go jump out of whatever. There is value in having amazing experiences in this world. And like I said, the preacher in Ecclesiastes isn't wrong that when he says it is a blessing from God to be able to enjoy things. God has put many enjoyable things in this world and given us the ability to enjoy them. But that can't be the guiding philosophy for our life. When it's the only thing that guides us, that is hedonism. And we're in the same place that the preacher is, where we look at the end of our life, that grave, and we say, nothing else is after that. We're all heading to that. Live it up now. YOLO. Let's look at what the preacher missed, and we're going to compare the wisdom of this preacher to the actual wisest person that ever lived, Jesus Christ. As I go deeper into the study, I've found myself amazed by something, because you've got the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and all of this wisdom in the Bible. And Ecclesiastes, he's kind of all over the place. He'll wander here in this book about wisdom itself, about toil, about time, and he kind of meanders from here, and he's got these cognitive dissonances, a lot of confusion. As I go further into the study, I am constantly struck by the wisdom of Jesus, where he's able to take all of those meandering thoughts, and in very simple teachings that are profoundly simple, put all of it to rest, answer all of the questions. That's just so amazing to me, because even me giving this sermon, I feel like maybe I'm meandering on a little bit. And Jesus, in like 2 statements, can answer the whole thing, and you're like, yes, that's it. That's the answer. So let's listen to what Jesus, the wise sage, has to say about this idea of toil and the vanity of toil. Jesus teaches us that proper alignment makes all of the difference. Aligning ourselves to what is highest, to what is most important, aligning ourselves to serving God himself above all things, will make all of the difference if you are looking for meaning in your life. Jesus echoes our teaching from Ecclesiastes in Luke chapter 12, and he adds a little bit to it that actually unravels and makes everything make sense. In Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." So right off the bat, we can see where the preacher started to go wrong in Ecclesiastes. He's so worried about all of the things he's earning in his life and that they're going to be squandered. And Jesus tells right off the bat, well, first of all, you're working for the wrong things. Beware of covetousness. Your value, your life does not consist in those physical things. And he goes on to tell them a story that exemplifies this. And he told them a parable saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? That sounds like what we're talking about in Ecclesiastes, right? This man has worked so hard and built up such an inheritance that he can hand down to his children. And God says, you know what? That was a waste of time. That was a waste. Your life is required of you. That grave at the end, that's right here. It's right now. It was a waste of time. Jesus acknowledges some of the truth of what the preacher in Ecclesiastes says, but then he adds this little note at the end. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. To have meaningful toil in your life, to have work that winds up meaning something, that makes a difference in this world, it starts with being rich toward God, not towards physical things, not towards life experiences to get them all in before we die. We need to start with aligning ourselves, having faith in God. That's where meaningfulness starts. Jesus tells us that one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. If you believe it does, you're going to wind up just like the preacher. Vanity of vanity, it was all a waste. And Jesus tells us, so is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Another teaching that Jesus gives that addresses this scenario. Therefore, in Matthew 6, verses 31 through 33, therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we wear? For your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. This is a teaching that Jesus is giving as part of a sermon, and he's telling people, don't be anxious about tomorrow. He gives the example of the birds. He says they sow not, they toil not, and yet they have plenty to eat. They have things to eat. He talks about the lilies of the field, and he says they don't toil either. And in fact, he goes back to reference Solomon and says Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed as these. So therefore, don't be anxious. But here's what you should do. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Now, Jesus isn't telling us that we don't need to work for things in our life. We'll see in a few moments that work is very integral to our lives, and we should be doing it. But we have to align our priorities. Our faith in God, our service to him, has to be the highest thing that we orient ourselves to. And then everything else will fall under that umbrella, and we will be taken care of. And our life will have meaning. That will make our toil not vain, not a waste of time. So we see that meaningful toil starts with faith in God, with proper alignment towards God. We see also that death is not the end. John chapter 6, verses 26 through 29, Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal. Then they said to him, what must we do to be doing the works of God? Jesus answered them, this is the work of God, that you believe in whom he has sent. So we see this idea echoed here, that proper, meaningful toil starts with faith in God, right? He says the work of God, that you believe in whom he has sent, which is himself, Jesus. Now these are people that they had been previously miraculously fed with fish and loaves. And the next day, Jesus goes across the lake, and they come all the way across this big body of water following Jesus and crowding around him because they wanted another free meal, right? And so Jesus tells them, don't work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life. It's a matter of priorities. There is a work that leads to eternal food. Did you notice that term, eternal? That's a big flashing sign that death is not the end of all of these things. There is an eternity beyond that, and we need to fix our focus upon that eternity. Faith is the antidote to despair. Later writers in the New Testament are going to take this idea, these teachings of Jesus, and they're going to give us more of a direct application of how this looks in our life. Because like I said, Jesus isn't saying, don't work at all, just sit around like a bird and food will come to you. That's not what he's saying. He's teaching us about aligning our priorities, aligning our focus. And that faith will be the antidote to despair. That doesn't mean your job is going to now all of a sudden be fun, but you will be saved from despair. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 17. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. When your focus is fixed upon that eternity, faith in God and the eternity that will bring, he says you'll be renewed day by day. He says when you're focused on that, you're focused on an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. And when your mind is focused on that, the drudgery of your daily job, all of a sudden you start to realize, yeah, this is a light momentary affliction. I tell you what, I'm a really horrible clock watcher. I'm the kind of person that I'm like, okay, there's an hour left of work. That is 15 minutes 4 times. Can I make it through 15 minutes? That's 4 times of 15 minutes. It's like I'm constantly doing that. Like, how can I get through this next period when then I can do whatever I want to do? Probably some of the kids feel that way in school. I'm the same. I don't know that goes away when you're an adult. But compare that to eternity. An eternity of a weight of glory that can't even be compared. And he's talking to people that are being persecuted under the threat of death for their faith. And he says that glory doesn't even, like, we can't even mention them in the same sentence. There's no comparison. Like, we can't even say times a million or times infinite. There's no comparison that you can make to the glory, to the reward in that eternity, to this momentary, difficult moment right now. Fix your eyes upon that eternity, and you'll realize that this life is temporary. God will judge all things. I like this picture here. Because somebody says, you know what, my job is kind of boring, but my boss is just really awful. And he treats me bad all the time, or she treats me bad. It's just really hard to serve this boss. And so I like this one. Before you get mad at your boss, walk a mile in his shoes. And those are clown shoes, by the way. People in this life are going to take advantage of our toil. And guess what? The physical things you work for are probably going to wind up in the hands of somebody who didn't work for it, who doesn't deserve it. And you know what? It's not fair. But how do we be okay with that? When our mind is fixed upon God and upon that eternity, we know that God is going to judge all things, including the stinky boss. Colossians 3, verses 22 through 25. An admonition to bondservants here, who probably is the best comparison to what we would call employees in our day. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. He doesn't say fearing your boss. He says fearing the Lord. Remember, our focus is fixed upon God now and serving him, seeking his kingdom first. He goes on to say, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Guess what? If your boss is awful, you're not working for your boss. You're working for the Lord. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Our preacher in Ecclesiastes, he is so worried about the injustice of his work going to somebody that doesn't deserve it. That's an injustice, and it certainly is, and we can feel that. We have an assurance here. Those injustices are going to be made right in the end. God is a righteous judge, And if you work hard for something your whole life and then it's squandered, God will see that and take that into account. This in judgment is an assurance of that. But there's an idea that undergirds all of this. Notice what he says. He says, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. Our preacher is fallen into such despair because his inheritance is going to people that don't deserve it, right? Do we deserve the inheritance from God? I don't think so. I try, but I still squander the gifts God has given. I've squandered his blessings so many times. We don't deserve the inheritance that eternal weight of glory. There's not a single thing I can do on this earth that deserves that. When we work hard in our life, and we do so with a genuine heart, we are demonstrating God's own love in the way that we work. Not because our boss is such a great person, which maybe there's a lot of great bosses out there too. Maybe you're a boss, and I hope you're a great one. I'm sure you are. But we are demonstrating in the way that we work in our daily lives how the Lord works. He gives his inheritance to people that don't deserve it, and he does it out of love. And God knows at the end that everything will be judged without partiality. All of the wrongs will be made right. God sees it all. And that's the conclusion that our narrator gives us back in Ecclesiastes. He says, don't be like the preacher who's given up to despair and is just going to live his life with a YOLO. Don't be like him. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. I hope our thoughts this morning have been an encouragement to you. This is something I have to remind myself of all the time, and I think I need even more reminding of it, because it is so easy. I tell you what, I'm the worst. I was the worst. I got in trouble for this in school all the time, that I'd be sitting there in class, staring out of the window, thinking how much fun it would be to climb the trees and not hear a word the teacher said and then get in trouble for it. And it's like that kind of work was a drudgery. It was despair, right? And nobody's saying our work is going to be fun. It's going to be work. We live in a fallen world. Work is not enjoyable in and of itself. There are things we can do to make it better. But if our mind is focused, if we are aligned with proper alignment to the right priorities to serving God, everything else falls into place, and we avoid that despair, and we trust in the richness of his inheritance at the end. And all of the injustices we face will be dealt with at the end. Remember this. I hope this is an encouragement to you to help you get through whatever you've got to go through this week. At the same time, if your faith has not been in God, that grave is still out there. It's waiting for you. That inheritance is not going to be yours. Please, if you are seeking meaning in your life, if you don't want your life to be a vanity of vanities, give your life to him. Place your faith in him. Put on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and that grave won't be the end. In the same way he burst forth, we will burst forth from the grave into his glory and into his presence. And all of the drudgery, all of the despair will have been more than worth it. There's an invitation this morning. If you would like to put on the Lord in baptism, we can help you with that. If you need prayers of encouragement, we can help you with that. If you need either one, please have a seat on the front while we sing our song of invitation.